President William Carter stood in front of the biggest window he had ever seen. Outside, stars filled the black space like tiny diamonds. He was on Kepler Prime, a space station bigger than most cities. Today was the most important day in human history. Carter was 47 years old. He had been a soldier before becoming president. His gray hair was cut short, and his blue eyes looked tired. He had not slept well in weeks. Today, he would speak to alien leaders from across the galaxy. It was humanity's first real meeting with other worlds. "Sir, it's time," said Admiral Lisa Morgan. She was Carter's head of security and his oldest friend. They had served together in the military 20 years ago. Lisa was tough and smart. She never smiled much, but Carter trusted her with his life. Carter nodded and walked toward the Great Hall. The station was huge and strange. The walls were made of some metal that changed colors. The air smelled different, like flowers mixed with electricity. Alien beings walked past them in the hallways. Some had 4 arms. Others looked like giant birds. A few seemed to be made of living rock. "Remember, sir," Lisa whispered as they walked, "these aliens think humans are weak. They think we are just animals from a small planet. Show them they are wrong." The Great Hall was enormous. It could hold 10,000 people easily. 12 different alien species sat in curved rows. Each group looked completely different from the others. At the front sat the Hegemony Coalition, the 12 most powerful alien races in the galaxy. Carter had studied each species for months. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin and no hair. They were known for being smart and cold. The Krillians were like giant insects with 4 arms and black shells. The Thornax looked like walking trees with glowing eyes. Each species had ruled space for thousands of years. "Humans of Earth," spoke Chancellor Vex, the Zephyrian leader. His voice was high and thin, like metal scraping metal. "You may begin. Your address." Carter walked to the center of the hall. Cameras from Earth were watching. 4 billion humans were seeing this moment. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "Leaders of the galaxy," Carter said, his voice strong and clear. "I am William Carter, President of Earth and representative of the human race. We come here today not as conquerors or beggars, but as equals who wish to join the community of worlds." Some aliens made strange sounds. Carter could not tell if they were laughing or angry. "For 3 years, we have known we are not alone in space. We have learned your languages. We have studied your cultures. We respect your achievements and your long histories. But we will not bow down to anyone." Chancellor Vex leaned forward. His silver eyes glowed with anger. "President Carter, you seem to misunderstand your position. Humanity is a young species from a single world. You have no right to demand equality with races that have ruled stars since before your people discovered fire." "We demand nothing," Carter replied calmly. "We offer friendship, trade, and cooperation. But we will remain free." The Krillian delegate, General Kor, clicked his mandibles together. When he spoke, his voice buzzed like angry bees. "Your species shows promises. Workers and soldiers. Accept tributary status under the Hegemony Coalition. We will protect you and guide you. In return, you will serve our needs." Carter had expected this. For the past year, human intelligence had learned about the tributary system. Younger species were forced to give resources, soldiers, and workers to the coalition. In return, they received protection and technology. But they were never treated as equals. They were slaves with better living conditions. "The answer is no," Carter said firmly. "Humanity will chart its own course among the stars." The hall erupted in angry sounds. Aliens shouted, clicked, and roared in their various languages. Carter stood still and waited for quiet. Chancellor Vex raised one thin hand, and the noise stopped. President Carter, you do not understand the galaxy you live in. Those who refuse our guidance face consequences. Many species have learned this lesson too late. Are you threatening us? Carter asked. I am stating facts, Vex replied. The galaxy has an order. Powerful species lead. Weak species follow. This system has brought peace for 1,000 years. Carter looked around the hall. He saw fear in some alien faces, anger in others, but he also saw something else. Some of the smaller alien delegates looked hopeful. They had been waiting for someone to stand up to the coalition. Peace built on slavery is not peace, Carter said. It is just organized oppression. Humanity rejects your system. We will make our own way. The Thornax delegate, an ancient tree-like being named Elder Groot, spoke in a voice like wind through. Leaves, young human, your species is brave but foolish. You have one small world and a few primitive ships. We have fleets that could turn your planet to ash. Then you would prove that your system is built on fear and violence, not justice, Carter replied. But I believe some of you are better than that. Carter turned to address the entire hall. To the leaders of free worlds, humanity offers friendship. To those who rule through fear, we offer this warning. We will not submit. We may be young, but we are not weak. We survived and thrived on a world that tried to kill us every day. We have fought through ice ages, plagues, and wars. We are still here. He paused and looked directly at Chancellor Vex. And we will still be here long after your empire of fear crumbles to dust. The hall fell silent. Then Chancellor Vex stood up slowly. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small device. Carter recognized it as a plasma weapon. Then you have chosen death, Vex said quietly. The energy bolt hit Carter in the chest before anyone could react. The president of Earth collapsed to the floor, his body smoking. Admiral Morgan screamed and rushed toward him, but coalition guards blocked her path. Let this be a lesson, Chancellor Vex announced to the hall. This is what happens to those who reject the natural order. But as Carter lay dying, he smiled. The cameras were still rolling. 4 billion humans had just watched their leader murdered in cold blood. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had just united humanity in rage. Admiral Lisa Morgan held President Carter's body as their small ship raced away from Kepler Prime. Blood covered her uniform. Her friend of 20 years was dead, murdered in front of the entire galaxy. But she had bigger problems right now. Coalition. Ships are following us, reported Captain Dan Miller from the pilot's seat. His hands shook as he pushed the engines harder. 3 heavy cruisers. They want us alive. Like hell, Morgan growled. She activated the ship's emergency beacon. All human vessels. This is Admiral Morgan. Code Black. The president is dead. Repeat. President Carter has been assassinated. The message went out across human space at light speed. Within hours, every human colony, station, and ship would know. The galaxy had just made 4 billion humans very angry. Back on Earth, Vice. President Jake Phillips was eating dinner with his family when the call came. He was a quiet man who preferred books to politics. Carter had chosen him because he was honest and smart. Now he was about to become president during humanity's darkest hour. Sir, you need to see this, said his aide, rushing into the dining room. The emergency broadcast was already playing on every screen across. Earth. Phillips watched in horror as Chancellor Vex shot President Carter down like a dog. His wife gasped and covered her mouth. His teenage daughter started crying. Around the world, 4 billion people felt the same shock and rage. Get me to the White House, Phillips said quietly. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. and call an emergency session of Congress. We're at war. The funeral 3 days later was the largest in human history. Every major city held memorial services. President Carter's body lay in state while millions of people came to pay respects. But this was not just mourning. This was a civilization preparing for battle. Dr. Emma Rodriguez worked late in her lab at the Xenobiology Institute. She was the Earth's leading expert on alien species. For 3 years, she had studied every piece of information about the galaxy's major powers. What she had learned terrified her. "Mr. President," she said during the emergency briefing, "the Coalition has done this before, many times." President Phillips sat at the head of the table. Around him were the military chiefs, intelligence directors, and scientific advisors. All of them looked grim. "Explain," Phillips said. Emma activated the holographic display. Star maps filled the room, showing hundreds of worlds. Over the past 1,000 years, the Hegemony Coalition has encountered 47 species that refused tributary status. 39 of those species are now extinct. The other 8 are slaves in all but name. General Marcus Webb, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. He was a big man with scars on his face from the border wars. "How did they do it?" "Different methods," Emma replied. "Sometimes economic warfare, sometimes direct military action. Sometimes they would support rebels or terrorists until the target government collapsed. But the result was always the same: submit or die." "What about species that fought back?" asked Director Kate Foster from Intelligence. Emma's face grew darker. The Valdari had a space empire that spanned 20 systems. They fought the Coalition. For 50 years, the Coalition turned their worlds into glass. The Nexari were master engineers who built incredible defenses. The Coalition waited them out, then poisoned their atmosphere. The Kroth were warriors who never surrendered. The Coalition hunted them down to the last child. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity was next on the list. "So we're dead," said General Webb grimly. "Not necessarily," Emma replied. "Each of those species made the same mistake. They fought the Coalition using Coalition rules. They tried to match their technology, their tactics, their strategy. But humans are different." "How?" President Phillips asked. Emma smiled for the first time in days. "Because we're from a death world, sir. Earth is the most dangerous planet any of these species has ever seen. It tried to kill us with ice ages, volcanoes, plagues, predators, and natural disasters. But we survived. More than that, we became the deadliest predators on our own world." She changed the display to show Earth's history. Every other species in the galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds. They had few natural enemies and plenty of resources. When they developed space travel, they found more peaceful worlds. They've been soft for thousands of years. "And us?" Phillips asked, though he was starting to understand. "We never stopped being hunters, sir. We just learned to hunt with spaceships and nuclear weapons instead of spears and fire." In the Pentagon, General, Webb was already putting together battle plans. But he faced a terrible problem. Humanity had only been in space for 50 years. Their fleet consisted of 12 exploration ships and 30 system defense vessels. The Coalition had thousands of warships. "We need time," Webb told his staff. "Time to build ships, train crews, and develop new weapons. But I don't think they'll give us that time." He was right. Intelligence reports were already coming in. Coalition fleets were moving toward human space. The aliens wanted to end this quickly, before humanity could prepare, but they had made a critical error. They thought humans would react like other species. They expected panic, surrender, or desperate last stands. Instead, they got something the galaxy had never seen before: humanity united, Every nation on Earth put aside their differences. The Chinese shared their manufacturing technology. The Americans opened their weapons research. The Russians provided their space launch systems. The Europeans contributed their engineering expertise. Countries that had been enemies for centuries worked together like brothers. Dr. Kevin Hartley led the crash weapons development program. He was a thin man with thick glasses who looked more like a librarian than a warrior. But his mind was brilliant and twisted in all the right ways. The aliens have better technology, he told his team, but they think in straight lines. They've had peace for so long, they've forgotten how to really fight. We're going to remind them. His team worked day and night. They took human weapons and made them deadlier. They studied alien technology and found weaknesses. Most importantly, they remembered that humans had always won through creativity and stubborn refusal to quit. Captain Susan Blake oversaw the emergency shipbuilding program. Every shipyard on Earth and the colonies worked at maximum speed. The designs were simple but effective. These were not exploration ships or luxury transports. These were weapons built for killing. Make them tough, Blake ordered her engineers. I don't care if they're pretty. I care if they can take damage and keep fighting. The ships that emerged from human shipyards looked brutal and functional. They were covered in armor and bristling with weapons. The aliens built elegant vessels that looked like works of art. Humans built flying fortresses that looked like death. But the most important change was in the human people themselves. The murder of President Carter had awakened something primal. In the human spirit, every man, woman, and child understood that their species faced extinction. There was no room for politics, selfishness, or fear. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. Young people lined up to join the fleet. Old veterans came out of retirement. Even civilians demanded to help in any way they could. We're not just building an army, President Phillips told the nation during his weekly address. We're forging our entire species into a weapon. The galaxy murdered our leader. They think we'll surrender or die quietly. They're about to learn that humanity doesn't know how to quit. 3 months after Carter's assassination, the first coalition fleet arrived at the edge of human space. Admiral Morgan, now commanding the defense forces, watched them approach on her sensors. 47 alien warships against humanity's hastily built defense fleet of 22 vessels. The aliens sent a surrender demand. Humanity's response was simple: come and take it. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's children were called the most dangerous species in the universe. The prey was about to become the predator. And once awakened, human wrath would reshape the stars themselves. 6 months had passed since President Carter's murder. The solar system looked completely different now. What had once been a peaceful collection of planets and colonies was now the most heavily defended fortress in the galaxy. Dr. Kevin Hartley stood in his underground laboratory on Mars, looking at his latest creation. The weapon was small enough to hold in his hand, but it could destroy a city. His team had been working without sleep for weeks. Are you sure this will work? Asked Dr. Amy Chun, his assistant. She was young and brilliant, one of the best minds Earth had ever produced. It'll work, Kevin replied with a tired smile. The aliens use energy fields to protect their ships, but they've never seen anything like this before. The weapon was called a quantum disruptor. It didn't just break through alien shields. It turned the shields against the ships themselves. The stronger the shield, the bigger the explosion when it collapsed. The coalition thinks we're still throwing rocks and sticks at them, Kevin continued. They're about to learn that humans are very good at killing things. On Earth, Captain. Susan Blake walked through the largest shipyard in human history. The facility stretched for miles under the Pacific Ocean. Hundreds of ships were being built at the same time. Workers labored in 3 shifts around the clock. How many ships? Can we have ready in 30 days? Asked General Webb, who had come to inspect the progress. 200 combat vessels, Susan replied. They're not as big as alien ships, but they're faster and tougher. Each one can take damage that would destroy 3 coalition vessels. The human ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were built like submarines, designed to take punishment and keep fighting. Every system had backups. Every weapon had multiple power sources. Even if half the ship was destroyed, the other half could still fight. What about crews? Webb asked. That's the easy part, Susan smiled. We have more volunteers than we have ships. Every human wants a chance to fight back. In the asteroid belt, Colonel Ryan Hill supervised the construction of humanity's secret weapons. His teams were turning ordinary space rocks into guided missiles. Each asteroid was fitted with engines and targeting computers. The aliens will scan them and see rocks, Ryan explained to his officers. By the time they realize the truth, it'll be too late. Ryan was a special forces officer who specialized in unconventional warfare. Before the war, he had fought rebels and terrorists across human space. Now he was preparing to teach the galaxy about human creativity in battle. Remember, he told his team, we don't fight fair, we fight to win. The aliens have honor and rules. We have anger and desperation. Guess which one wins wars? President Phillips visited every military base and shipyard in human space. Everywhere he went, he saw the same thing. Humans working together like never before. Old enemies were now brothers. Former rivals shared their secrets freely. The aliens think they broke us, Phillips told a crowd of shipyard workers on Luna. They think killing President Carter would make us surrender. Instead, they united our entire species against them. They didn't just murder our leader, they created their own worst nightmare. The crowd cheered, but Phillips knew the truth. Humanity was still vastly outnumbered. The coalition had thousands of ships and billions of soldiers. Even with all their preparations, this would be the hardest fight in human history. Dr. Emma Rodriguez continued studying alien psychology and tactics. Her research had revealed something important about the coalition species. They're not used to real war, she explained to the military leadership. For the past 1,000 years, they've either fought primitives with spears or conducted careful, limited conflicts with each other. They've never faced an enemy that fights like humans. What do you mean? Asked Admiral Morgan. Humans are persistence hunters, Emma replied. We don't give up, ever. Other species fight until they suffer acceptable losses. Then they negotiate or retreat. But humans fight until the enemy is completely destroyed, or we are. She showed them recordings of coalition military exercises. The alien tactics were elegant and precise, like a dance. Ships moved in perfect formations. Battles followed predictable patterns. They fight like they're playing chess, Emma said. But humans fight like we're in a street brawl. We don't care about looking good or following rules. We care about winning. In space, construction crews were building the largest defensive network ever created. The entire solar system was being turned into a trap. Minefields surrounded every planet. Weapon platforms hid in asteroid fields. Secret bases were carved into moons and comets. Captain Chris Turner commanded the defensive preparations. He was a naval officer who had studied every space battle in human history. Now he was designing humanity's last stand. When they come, he told his staff, they'll expect us to meet them in open space like gentlemen. Instead, we're going to drag them into the system and tear them apart piece by piece. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Human forces would appear to retreat, drawing the coalition deeper into the solar system. Then the trap would spring. Every asteroid, every moon, Every piece of space debris would become a weapon. The aliens build beautiful ships for beautiful battles, Turner explained. We're going to give them the ugliest, dirtiest fight they've ever seen. Meanwhile, intelligence reports showed coalition fleets gathering at staging areas throughout the galaxy. The aliens were taking no chances. They were sending enough ships to destroy Earth 10 times over, but they had made one critical mistake. They still thought of humans as just another primitive species. They expected the same tactics, the same surrender, the same ending as 47 other worlds. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Martinez ran the Psychological Warfare Division. Her job was to understand how the coalition thought and how to break their morale. Fear, she told President Phillips during a briefing. The coalition rules through fear. Their tributary species obey because they're afraid. But the coalition leaders are afraid too, afraid of losing control, afraid of looking weak. How do we use that? Phillips asked. We make them more afraid of us than their subjects are of them, Beth replied with a cold smile. We show the galaxy that the coalition can bleed. Once their subjects see that, the whole system starts to crumble. Dr. Hartley's weapons teams had created dozens of new technologies. Missiles that could think and hunt on their own. Energy weapons that grew stronger the more they were fired. Armor that could repair itself in the middle of battle. But their most dangerous creation was something much simpler: the human soldier. Every person in the fleet had trained for months in zero-gravity combat. They knew their ships like their own bodies. Most importantly, they knew exactly what they were fighting. FOR. The aliens fight for conquest, General Webb told the assembled fleet commanders. We fight for survival. They want to add us to their empire. We want to make sure our children grow up free. Which do you think is stronger motivation? The final. Preparations were complete. Human space bristled with weapons and defenses. Every man, woman, and child knew their role. The species that had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts was ready for the greatest threat in their history. Admiral Morgan stood on the bridge of the HFS Vengeance, humanity's flagship. Through the viewports, she could see the lights of 1,000 human ships. Each one carried the hopes and anger of their entire species. Admiral, reported her communications officer, long-range sensors are picking up the coalition fleet. They'll be here in 72 hours. Morgan nodded grimly. After months of preparation, the moment had finally come. The galaxy's strongest empire was coming to destroy humanity. But they would find Earth's children ready and waiting. Send a message to all ships, Morgan ordered. This is for President Carter. This is for every human child who will ever be born. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity will not go quietly into the dark. The coalition was about to learn that there was something worse than facing humanity in battle. There was awakening humanity's wrath. And once awakened, that wrath would burn across the stars until justice was done. The coalition fleet arrived at the edge of human space like a moving city. 300 massive ships in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. Each vessel was 3 times larger than humanity's biggest warship. The aliens had come to end the human problem once and for all. Fleet Commander Zex stood on the bridge of the coalition flagship, studying the primitive solar system ahead. He was Chancellor Vex's younger brother, chosen for this mission because of his reputation for quick, decisive victories. Scan the system, Zex ordered his crew. I want to know where every human ship is hiding. The tactical officer, a Krillian, with silver mandibles, clicked nervously. Sir, we're reading unusual activity throughout the system. The humans appear to have heavily fortified their worlds. Expected, Zex replied coldly. Primitive species always build useless defenses when cornered. Begin the attack. I want this finished before the day is over. But as the coalition fleet moved deeper into the solar system, strange things began happening. Ships that looked like asteroids suddenly came to life, revealing weapon systems and engines. What appeared to be empty space erupted with missile fire from hidden platforms. Admiral Morgan watched from her command center, buried deep in Luna. Around her, dozens of screens showed the battle developing exactly as planned. The Coalition was walking into the most elaborate trap in military history. Phase 1 is complete, reported Captain Turner. The enemy fleet is now fully committed to the inner system. All escape routes are sealed. Begin Phase 2, Morgan ordered. Throughout the solar system, what the Coalition had mistaken for debris and asteroids revealed their true nature. Thousands of hidden weapons platforms opened fire simultaneously. The space around the alien fleet filled with missiles, energy beams, and kinetic projectiles. Commander Zex watched in shock as his beautiful formations dissolved into chaos. Ships that had dominated the galaxy for centuries found themselves under attack from every direction. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. Where are their main forces? He demanded. This is just harassment fire. Sir? His tactical officer replied with growing fear. I don't think these are harassment attacks. 17 of our ships have already been destroyed. The human weapons were unlike anything in the Coalition's experience. Instead of single powerful shots, they fired thousands of smaller projectiles that swarmed like angry insects. The Coalition's shields, designed to stop massive energy blasts, were overwhelmed by the sheer number of impacts. Captain Blake led the first wave of human fighters from her command ship. Unlike the massive Coalition vessels, human ships were small, fast, and deadly. They moved like wolves hunting a herd, coordinating their attacks with precision. Remember your training, Blake told her pilots. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and get out. We're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to kill them all. The human fighters used tactics borrowed from submarine warfare. They would appear from hiding, strike with devastating effect, and vanish back into the asteroid fields before the enemy could respond. The Coalition's massive ships were too slow to catch them. Dr. Hartley's quantum disruptors proved even more effective than hoped. The weapons turned the Coalition's own shields into bombs. The stronger the alien defense, the more spectacular the explosion when it collapsed. Their shields are failing across the board, reported Lieutenant Colonel Hill from his mobile command post. The quantum disruptors are working perfectly. Hill's special forces had spent months preparing for this moment. They didn't just attack ships, they attacked the Coalition's ability to coordinate their forces. Communications satellites were destroyed. Command ships were targeted with precision strikes. Soon the mighty Coalition fleet was blind, deaf, and confused, but the real shock came when the humans revealed their main battle fleet. 200 warships emerged from hiding places throughout the system. These were not the elegant vessels preferred by galactic civilization. They were brutal, functional killing machines designed for one purpose: destroying the enemy. The human ships moved unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. They fought like living creatures, adapting their tactics moment by moment. When one ship was damaged, others would move to protect it. When they found weakness in the enemy line, they would swarm it like predators. This is impossible, Commander, Zex said, watching his fleet being torn apart. Intelligence said they had less than 50 ships. How do they have so many? Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Admiral Morgan's face peered on the main screen. Her expression was cold as winter ice. Behind her, the flags of every human nation flew side by side. Coalition forces, Morgan said. You came here to destroy us, like you destroyed 47 other species. But you made one mistake. You thought humans were like the others, weak, divided, easy to break. You were wrong. She paused, letting Her words sink in. You murdered our leader in cold blood. You threatened our children. You tried to enslave our world. Now you face the consequences. Surrender now, Zex demanded, and your deaths will be quick. Morgan actually smiled. Commander, you still don't understand. We're not the ones who are going to die today. The battle raged for hours. The Coalition fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming at the start, was being systematically destroyed. Human ships swarmed around the larger alien vessels, like antibodies attacking an infection. Colonel Martinez's psychological warfare proved devastating. As Coalition ships were destroyed, their final transmissions were broadcast across the galaxy. The mighty Hegemony Coalition was not just losing, they were being humiliated by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Sir, the Krillian tactical officer told Commander Zex, we've lost over half our fleet. We need to retreat. No, Zex replied through gritted teeth. We cannot return to the Coalition, having been defeated by animals. Continue the attack. But it was too late. The human trap had closed completely. Every Coalition ship that tried to escape found its path blocked by more human vessels. The solar system had become a killing field, and the Coalition fleet was trapped in the center. Dr. Rodriguez had been right about alien psychology. The Coalition species had never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. They expected negotiations, ceasefires, and honorable surrenders. Instead, they found humans who fought like the predators they had always been. Captain Susan Blake's ship, the HFS Retribution, closed in on the Coalition flagship. Her weapons were fully charged, and her crew was ready for the final strike. This is for President Carter, she said over the cone channel, knowing the Coalition would hear her words. And this is for every species you've enslaved. The quantum disruptors fired in perfect synchronization. The Coalition flagship's shields collapsed inward, creating a chain reaction that tore the massive vessel apart. Commander Zex had just enough time to realize his mistake before the explosion consumed him. The battle was over. Of the 300 Coalition ships that had entered human space, fewer than 20 survived to limp away. The rest were debris floating in the solar system that had become their graveyard. But Admiral Morgan knew this was just the beginning. The surviving Coalition ships would return to their home worlds with news of the defeat. The galaxy would learn that the mighty Hegemony Coalition could be beaten. Send a message to all human colonies, Morgan ordered. Phase 1 is complete. Begin Phase 2 immediately. Throughout human space, fleets that had been building in secret began to move. The Coalition had expected to fight a defensive war against a cornered species. Instead, they were about to face something far worse. Humanity unleashed upon the galaxy. The prey had become the predator. And the hunt was just beginning. On Earth, President Phillips addressed the world with news of the victory. But his expression was grim rather than celebratory. Today we prove that humanity cannot be bullied or enslaved, he said. But our work is not finished. The Coalition has oppressed the galaxy for 1,000 years. They have enslaved dozens of species and murdered billions of innocents. President Carter died fighting for freedom, not just human freedom, but freedom for all sentient beings. Now we will finish what he started. The message was clear. This was not just about revenge for Carter's assassination. This was about tearing down a system of oppression that had ruled the galaxy for too long. The Coalition had awakened something they could not understand or control. They had turned a peaceful species into the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever seen. And now, like a wildfire spreading through dry grass, humanity's wrath would consume everything in its path until justice was done. 1 year after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was a very different place. The news of the Coalition's defeat had spread like wildfire through every star system. For the first time in 1,000 years, the oppressed species of the galaxy had hope. Admiral Morgan stood in the command center of her flagship as it approached the Altair system. Around her, 50 human warships moved in perfect formation. They were not here to conquer. They were here to liberate. "Admiral," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Altairan resistance." The face that appeared on screen was that of Kala Ven, leader of the Altairan underground. Her people looked like humans with blue skin and large eyes. They had been coalition slaves for 300 years. "Human fleet," Kala said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We have waited so long for this day. The coalition garrison has 40 ships and 10,000 soldiers. Can you really free us?" "Watch and learn," Morgan replied with a grim smile. Battle for Altair lasted 6 hours. The coalition forces, already demoralized by their defeat at Sol, found themselves facing an enemy they could not understand. Human ships struck from impossible angles, using tactics that made no sense according to military doctrine. Colonel Hill's special forces had been perfecting their techniques for months. They didn't just attack military targets, they dismantled the entire system of control. Communication networks went down. Supply lines were cut. Command centers were captured or destroyed. The coalition rules through fear and information control. Hill explained to his officers. Take away their ability to communicate and coordinate, and they become just another bunch of bullies with fancy weapons. The Altairan people rose up as soon as they saw the coalition was losing. Centuries of oppressed rage exploded into rebellion across every world in the system. The coalition garrison found themselves fighting not just human soldiers, but an entire species desperate for freedom. Dr. Helen Price led the diplomatic mission that followed every military victory. She was a former ambassador who had spent years studying galactic politics. Her job was to build something better than what they were tearing down. "We're not here to replace the coalition as galactic rulers," she told the liberated Altairans. "We're here to help you govern yourselves. The age of empires is over, but not every world welcomed human liberation. On Draconis Prime, the ruling class had grown rich and powerful under coalition protection. They saw humanity as a threat too. Their comfortable lives. The humans are savages," declared Prime Minister Korth to his council. "They will destroy our civilization and drag us back to barbarism." But the Draconian people had a different opinion. They had watched the broadcasts of human victories, seen how liberated worlds prospered under self-rule. When the human fleet arrived, most of the population welcomed them as heroes. Captain Blake led the assault on the Draconian defense fleet. The battle was brief and one-sided. Coalition loyalists who had grown soft from centuries of easy living were no match for battle-hardened human warriors. "This is your only warning," Blake broadcast to the remaining coalition ships. "Surrender now, or share the fate of your flagship." The coalition commander, Admiral Vex, was old and proud. He had served the hegemony for 60 years and could not imagine a galaxy without it. "I will not surrender to primitives," he declared. His ship lasted exactly 47 seconds against concentrated human fire. The real victory came later, when Dr. Price met with representatives from across Draconian space. The meeting was held in the same palace where coalition governors had once ruled with absolute power. "We offer you a choice," Price told the assembled delegates. "Join the growing alliance of free worlds, or remain isolated. But the days of ruling over others through fear are finished." Most chose freedom. A few colonies tried to maintain the old system, declaring themselves loyal to the remaining coalition forces. They quickly discovered that their own people would not tolerate oppression when freedom was available just a star system away. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian homeworld, Chancellor Vex watched his empire crumble. Daily reports brought news of more defeats, more rebellions, more systems declaring independence. The species that had murdered President Carter was learning the price of their actions. "We must negotiate," urged his advisors. "The humans are willing to discuss terms." "Never," Vex replied coldly. "We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy. These upstart animals will learn their place." But humanity had no intention of negotiating with President Carter's murderer. Instead, they implemented something far more: creative, complete isolation. Every Zephyrian ship in space was hunted down and destroyed or captured. Every satellite around their homeworld was disabled. Every communication array was turned to scrap metal. Within months, the Zephyrians found themselves completely cut off from the galaxy they had once ruled. "Let them think about what they've done," President Phillips told his cabinet. "When they're ready to face justice for their crimes, we'll be waiting." The psychological effect was devastating. The Zephyrian government, which had ruled through information and communication, found itself deaf and blind. Their people began to question leaders who had promised easy victory over primitive humans. 2 years after Carter's assassination, the last major coalition fleet made its final stand at Beta Centauri. Fleet Admiral Corax had gathered every remaining loyal ship, over 500 vessels, for one last attempt to crush the human rebellion. Admiral Morgan met them with the combined fleets of 12 liberated worlds. Humans fought alongside Alterans, Draconians, and dozens of other species who had tasted freedom and refused to give it up. "Today we finish what President Carter started," Morgan announced to the Allied fleet. "Today we end 1,000 years of oppression." The battle was the largest in galactic history. For 18 hours, the space around Beta Centauri burned with weapons fire. But the outcome was never really in doubt. Free people fighting for their homes and families will always defeat slaves fighting for their masters. When the shooting stopped, the Hegemony Coalition existed only in history books. 3 years after President Carter's death, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Kepler Prime, the same station where he had been murdered. But this time, they came to build something new. President Phillips stood at the podium where Carter had made his final speech. Behind him hung a simple banner, Alliance of Free Worlds. The memorial plaque honoring Earth's murdered president had been installed in the exact spot where he fell. "My predecessor came here offering friendship and cooperation," Phillips told the assembled delegates. "He was murdered for refusing to bow to tyranny. Today, we gather to ensure that no leader ever again faces that choice." The Alliance Charter was simple. No species could rule over another. No government could deny basic rights to its people. And any attempt to recreate the old system of oppression would be met with swift and overwhelming force. Dr. Rodriguez, now the Alliance's chief xenobiologist, had spent years studying the former coalition species. Her conclusions were both hopeful and sobering. Most of them never wanted to be oppressors, she reported. They were trapped in a system that rewarded cruelty and punished compassion. Given the chance, most species prefer cooperation to domination. The former coalition worlds were rebuilding under new governments. Trade flowed freely between systems. Scientific knowledge was shared openly. Art and culture flourished as species learned from each other without fear. But some problems remained. Pirates and warlords tried to fill the power vacuum left by the coalition's collapse. Criminal organizations attempted to enslave weaker worlds. Old hatreds between species sometimes flared into violence. That's where humanity's military prowess proved most valuable. The Alliance Defense Force, led by human officers, but including soldiers from every member world, became known throughout the galaxy as swift and implacable peacekeepers. "We don't start fights," General Webb told his officers, "but we sure as hell finish them." The Zephyrian homeworld remained in isolation, its people slowly starving as their civilization crumbled without outside contact. Chancellor Vex still refused to surrender, but his government was collapsing from within. "Sir," his communications minister told him during what would be their final cabinet meeting, "the people are demanding we accept the alliance terms. They want food, medicine, and contact with the outside galaxy." "The Zephyrians bow to no one," Vex declared. "Then the Zephyrians will die alone," his minister replied sadly. The revolution came 3 days later. Vex was captured trying to flee the planet and brought before an alliance tribunal. For the first time since Carter's assassination, he faced human justice. "Chancellor Vex," said Judge Patricia Wells, "you are charged with murder, crimes against sentient beings, and genocide. How do you plead?" Vex remained defiant to the end. "I am the rightful ruler of this galaxy. I recognize no authority but my own." "Then you will die as you lived," Wells replied calmly. Alone and forgotten. 5 years after President Carter's death, Admiral Morgan returned to Earth for the dedication of the Carter Memorial. The monument stood in Washington, where the old president had once worked. But its message was broadcast to every world in the Alliance. William Carter died so that others could be free. Read the inscription. He showed us that some things are worth any sacrifice. His death unit